One of the things that makes R especially useful and unique is the extensive set of packages that have been and continue to be developed and made available by the community of R users. This is the first of two videos on installing, loading, and using these packages. Nearly every R package is stored in one of two online repositories. The first is the Comprehensive R Archive Network, or CRAN, and the second is Bioconductor. We'll work with CRAN here, and then address Bioconductor packages in Part 2. In order for a package to be made available through either of these repositories, it has to meet a number of criteria that include tests of the software itself. So you can have some confidence that packages from either of these places will work as they should across different platforms. At my last check, there were more than 15,000 packages available through CRAN. You can browse these from the packages link at cran.r-project.org. However, you're probably more likely to identify a new package of interest from discipline-specific literature or with a Google search. I've recently been doing some work with variant call format, or VCF files, and we'll work with one of these in this video. If you want to follow along, the example VCF file I'll use is available from the link pasted in a comment pinned to this video. If you're not familiar with VCF files, they're files that store information on genetic variation from different samples in a standardized format. However, the only thing you really need to know for this video is that the specific format they're in isn't really conducive to using standard methods for loading them into R. After searching around a bit, I found a package called Pegas that has a function read.vcf. This function specifically reads in VCF files and reformats them into a common data structure in R, a data frame, which we talked about in the previous video. Let's try installing the Pegas package. The first thing I'll do is have a look at the manual for the package, which you can find in a number of ways, but maybe the easiest is just with a search online for the package name. There are a few primary things to note here. First, we can see that it's available from CRAN. Second, there are some other packages that are required in order to run Pegas, which are listed on the Depends and Imports lines. Let's not worry about the differences in these and just consider them together as additional required packages for running Pegas. These will fall into one of two categories. First is the version of R that's required. It's important to check this, especially if you're running an older version of R. In this case, Pegas requires that you have R version 2.6.0 or later. If you aren't sure what version of R you have, you can run the session info function at your R prompt, and the version of R is the first item returned. In this case, I have 3.6.1. In addition to the version of R needed, these lines list additional required R packages. For Pegas, there are 5. The first is APE, and specifically version 2.4 or later. I can check the Packages tab in RStudio, for me it's in the bottom right window, to get a list of what I already have installed. These are in alphabetical order, and APE is not there, so I don't have it. I could individually install each of the required packages before installing Pegas, but fortunately there's no need to. R generally makes installing packages pretty easy, and installing and loading the CRAN package you want, along with all its necessary dependencies, can generally be accomplished with just two functions, install.packages and library. We'll start with install.packages. The only argument you usually need to pass to this function is the name of the package you want to install, in this case Pegas, and remember to wrap it in double quotes. This function downloads the package from CRAN and installs it on your computer. Note, you'll need to make sure you have an internet connection to do this. By default, the install.packages function will also identify any dependencies for the package that you don't already have installed, and it will get those for you too. Those extra required packages will be listed in a message printed to the screen during the download, unless you've turned that behavior off. In my case, there are around 20 or so dependency packages listed here in red that are included as part of the download. During the installation, I get a message that asks whether to install from sources. You might see a similar message from time to time, so I'll try to briefly explain here. For each package, there are two types of files that can be used to install it: source code files and binary files. When a program is written, it's written in some human-readable language. Granted, it might be a coding language you don't understand, but at least anyone familiar with that language could interpret it. That's the source code. As part of the installation process, that source code has to be translated or compiled into computer language, which is not human-readable. That's the binary file. In practice, this means that installing from the binary is usually easier than installing from source, as the compiling step is already taken care of. Which one R actually uses, the source code or the binary, depends on what operating system you're working on. I'm currently on a Mac, which is able to work with either binaries or source code. In most cases, the binary version of the package will be the same as the source code version, so there isn't any problem. Occasionally though, like in this case, the most recent binary version that's available in CRAN is different than the most recent version available as source code, and R isn't sure which one to use. It's possible an updated version of the package was recently written, and the source code is available for the newer version, but the binary hasn't been created and made available yet. So, R is asking which one you want to use. The options basically come down to using the source code, which will give us the newest version, or the binary, which might be a version behind, but also might offer a smoother installation, since occasionally installing from source can require installation of additional software on the computer. For this example, I'm going to type no here and hit enter, which will cause it to use the binary and not install from the source. Alternatively, you could try the installation from source by typing yes at this point, and if it fails, either go outside of R and download the additional necessary software, or just run the install.packages function a second time and go forward with the binary. For me, this installation took about 10 seconds or so. It ended with a message showing where the downloaded packages are stored, which suggests the installation was successful. If I now try to access the help page for the function I'm interested in, which I usually do with a question mark followed directly by the function name, R still can't find it. This is because while the Pegas package has been installed on my computer, it hasn't yet been loaded into my current R session. I'll do that with the library function. When I do, several messages are printed. One common type of message that I'll highlight is represented by the last two items on my screen. Specifically, the following object is masked from package AID4, AMOVA. Masking of objects is something to be aware of for the occasional times it becomes an issue. Remember that there are thousands of packages that are written by many different R users. These packages each contain a number of functions that were defined and named by the authors of the package. In this case, the package AID4 was loaded and it contained a function named AMOVA. Then, the Pegas package was loaded and it contained its own function named AMOVA. These two functions may or may not do the same thing. If you have both packages loaded and then try to run the AMOVA function, R wouldn't know which one to run. So, this message is telling you that the AMOVA function from Pegas is masking the AMOVA function from AID4, meaning that if you run the AMOVA function, you'll get the one from Pegas. If you want the one from AID4, you can specify it by preceding the function name with the package name and 2 colons, in this case, AID4 : AMOVA. Most importantly though, if we try read.vcf again at the R prompt, this time, the help page for that function is returned, demonstrating that we now have Pegas loaded in our session, and therefore have access to all of its functions. One more note about using packages. You should only need to run the install.packages function once for each package. However, you need to reload the package for each R session. So if you close R, you'll need to rerun the library function for each package you want to use after you start a new session. In the next video, we'll look at getting packages from the other main R repository, Bioconductor, which has its own unique installation-related syntax and functions.